The courtroom is cold, not just from the marble or the busted vent in the ceiling that coughs stale air every 12 seconds. No, this cold is intentional, the kind designed to strip you down before a single word is spoken. Naomi stands in the middle of it, chains on her wrists, orange jumpsuit hanging loose off her shoulders. Eyes steady. She's not guilty, not really. She's here on a contempt charge. For what, exactly? Asking a question too boldly, raising her voice in the wrong zip code, challenging a process she knew better than most. The kind of thing that gets called disorderly when the body it's coming from is brown and female. The judge leans back in his seat, but it's not the judge who speaks. It's the officer beside her, Sergeant Wexler. Thick forearms, a buzz cut that looks self-administered, a voice made of gravel and pride. She's non-compliant, he says. Naomi hasn't moved, hasn't spoken. Still, he steps forward. And that's when it happens. He pulls out a pair of electric clippers. No warning. No consent. He plugs them into the wall, the cord dragging across tile like a snake that knows it's protected. Court orders all inmates to appear clean-cut and compliant, Wexler announces. And this one here came in full of opinions. Laughter. From the gallery. From the clerk. Even from one of the bailiffs. Not loud. Just enough. Naomi flinches, but only once. Wexler steps behind her. Flips the switch. Zzzzzt. The sound hits first. Then the hum. Then the vibration as he presses it to her scalp. No gloves. No apology. Just power. Her braids fall in clumps. One lands on her shoulder. Another curls at her feet like a fallen crown. No one stops him. Not the judge. Not the room. Because no one ever really believes the scalp is sacred until it's yours. When he's done, Wexler steps back. Now she looks how she acts, he says. And the gavel strikes the desk like punctuation on a humiliation everyone agreed to pretend was procedural. Naomi doesn't cry. She lifts her chin and locks eyes with the judge, then with Wexler, and finally with the marble eagle carved above the seal of the court. She sees it for what it is, a symbol that never protected her and never intended to. But what she knows, and what they'll come to learn, is this. You can shave a head, but you can't scalp dignity, not when it's carved bone deep. The sound of the clippers never really leaves. It lingers, long after the courtroom clears, echoing off her skull like an old siren, low, mechanical, unforgiving. Naomi walks out, head high, scalp raw from the vibration, but posture unbroken. The inmates don't laugh. They've seen it before. Not the shaving, the statement. They nod at her. Not in pity, in recognition. Later that night, in the holding cell, the woman bunking 2 cots over Shay, tattooed fingers, gravel laugh, leans in and says, they only shave power when they're scared of it. Naomi doesn't respond. She's busy reassembling herself. Not physically. There's no mirror. Just stainless steel walls that reflect a version of her that feels like a stranger. But the mind? That's hers. Sharp. Focused. She remembers every face in that courtroom. The chuckle from the clerk. The sideways grin from the bailiff. The way the judge scribbled something with a smirk as if this were nothing but protocol. And Wexler. The way he enjoyed it. That's the part that stays lodged. He didn't just follow an order. He performed it. Like she was an act in a traveling show designed to teach every black woman who might dare raise a hand in court that there are consequences for being whole. At 2 a.m., she asks for a pencil. The guard shrugs. Gives her one. On the back of a napkin, she starts writing. Not a complaint. A declaration. I will take their courtroom. I will take their seal. I will take the very space they used to take me apart. And I will make it mine. She doesn't sleep. By morning, she's memorized every line of the municipal code that governs courtroom appearance. There's no clause about shaving. No regulation. No policy. It wasn't law. It was Wexler. And she's going to bury him with his own handbook. When she's released 3 days later, the news doesn't cover it. No statement. No outrage. Just another black woman walking out of county lockup with less than she walked in with. Except Naomi? She walks out with more. More resolve. More rage, sure, but not the reckless kind. The structured kind. The kind that reads case law over breakfast. The kind that studies for the bar while working 3 jobs. The kind that teaches herself how to write motions, then argues them better than people already licensed to practice. Wexler thought he cut her down. He didn't know he was carving out a path. And in time, that path? It's going to lead right back to him. Naomi doesn't disappear. She multiplies. For every braid that hit that courtroom floor, She builds a law book tower twice as high. During the day, she waits tables. At night, she reads statutes by the light of a flickering lamp in a borrowed room with thin walls and thicker silence. Each page she turns? A reclamation. Each case brief she studies? A notch in the armor she's building. She files for her records from the courthouse. They stonewall her at first. Destroyed, they say. But she knows better. She files a Freedom of Information request. Waits. 6 weeks later, she receives a manila envelope in the mail. Inside, her docket sheet. Timestamp. Judge's name. Wexler's initials. Under notes, a phrase scribbled in pen. Subject uncooperative. Ordered grooming for courtroom decorum. She stares at those words for a long time. Ordered grooming. Like she's livestock. Like she's an untamed thing that needed to be made presentable. It should have broken her. Instead, it becomes her thesis. By the time she applies to law school, she's already done more field research than half the faculty. She writes her admissions essay not about dreams, but about humiliation. She doesn't ask for sympathy. She demands space. You shaved my head in court. Now let me show you what I've done with the brain beneath it. She's admitted. Full ride. First year, she keeps her head shaved by choice. Let the memory live. Let people see it. Second year, she starts speaking. Small workshops at community centers. Then libraries. Then universities. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. The story carries its own gravity. By the time she takes the bar, her inbox is already full of people asking, "When will you start your practice?" She doesn't answer them. Because she's not planning to practice. She's planning to sit. At the bench. With her robe. In the same courthouse where the echo of clippers still lives in the walls. She passes the bar on the first try. No one's surprised. Except the people who thought they already shaved her story down to silence. And Sergeant Wexler? He hasn't heard her name yet. But he will. Because Naomi isn't coming back for revenge. She's coming back to redefine the room. The appointment is quiet at first. Just a line in the local paper. Naomi Clark named interim municipal judge. No fanfare. No ceremony. Just ink and irony. Because it's that courthouse. The same one. Same walls. Same chairs. Same gavel she heard fall as her hair hit the floor. Naomi walks in the first morning before anyone else arrives. She stands in the center of the room. Breathes. Looks up at the ceiling, marble eagle still perched above the seal, wings outstretched like it's watching for threats it never understood. She steps toward the bench. Runs a hand along the rail. Smooth, cool, untouched. Then places one palm flat on the wooden surface, exactly where her forehead once rested, shoved, trembling, shamed. Now, she straightens. And sits. The chair creaks slightly beneath her. She adjusts her robe. Pulls a small photo from her bag. Her mother, seated at a sewing machine, head wrapped in a scarf, eyes tired but proud. Naomi tucks it behind the nameplate they haven't changed yet. Interim judge. That'll do for now. The first case is minor parking dispute. Then a tenant complaint. Then a petty theft. And then the door opens. She looks up. Sergeant Wexler walks in. No badge this time. Retired. Or pushed out. Rumors swirl. It doesn't matter. He's not in uniform anymore. But she is. He doesn't recognize her at first. She doesn't speak. Just lets him walk up to the bench to hand in paperwork for a restraining order request he's now pursuing as a private citizen. Then their eyes meet. He freezes. Not dramatically. Not like the movies. Just stops. His hand hovers midair. His voice trails off. Naomi leans forward. Calm. Composed. And says the first 3 words she's ever spoken to him in full authority. State your name. His lips twitch. He speaks it. Quiet. Thin. She looks down at the papers. Reviews them thoroughly. Then makes her ruling. Fair. By the book. No fire. No flare. Just law. Because that's what he tried to take from her. And now? She owns it. As he turns to leave, she calls out. Sergeant. He stops. Turns. She stands. Face calm. Voice steady. Did you bring your clippers? The room stills. He says nothing. She smiles small, not smug. Then adds. Don't worry. We don't cut people down here anymore. He leaves. No words. No pride. Just silence. And for the first time, the courtroom isn't cold. It's corrected. Word spreads faster than the official notice. Before the city updates its website, before the new plaque is screwed into the wall, people already know. The courtroom that once humiliated Naomi Clark now holds her name at the front. Judge Clark, they say. Some with reverence, some with disbelief, a few with quiet discomfort. But everyone says it. Her docket fills fast. But so does the back row of the courtroom. Not with defendants. Not lawyers. Watchers. Mothers who remember what it felt like to be cut down mid-sentence. Daughters who've never seen someone like them behind the bench. Young men who sat in those pews with sagging jeans and crossed arms, now sitting straighter, not because they're afraid, but because they see something different. Naomi notices them all, and she makes space. No spectacle, no grandstanding, just consistency. She doesn't speak louder than other judges. She speaks clearly, and when someone raises their voice at a defendant, she raises a hand. Palm open, silent, and they stop. Because in her courtroom, dignity doesn't wait to be granted. It's expected. The clerk, new, young, sharp, asked her one day, "How do you stay so calm with some of them?" Naomi sips her coffee. "They shaved my head once." The clerk stiffens. "Oh." Naomi smiles faintly. "And still, I'm here." She sets her cup down. "If I can survive that, I can survive the sound of their frustration." One afternoon, during a recess, she walks the perimeter of the courtroom, touches the very tile where her braids once scattered. She remembers them thick, full, hers. But she doesn't feel loss. She feels proof. Because that moment wasn't her undoing. It was her start. Outside the courtroom, someone spray-painted over an old plaque that honored a former judge known for harsh sentencing. The city planned to restore it, but someone else got there first. They cleaned it, repainted it, and left 3 words below the name. She returned stronger. Naomi walks by it every morning. And every time, she nods. Because she didn't just take the bench. She took the power they thought they erased. Justice looks different now. It wears curls again. 3 inches, soft and coiled, tucked behind her ears, not as decoration, not as defiance, but as a quiet declaration. "I'm whole again." Naomi never mentions the hair. But people notice. Especially those who remember what it looked like when she walked out that courtroom door years ago, shaved, raw, unbowed. Now, she walks back in with a full crown and a full command of the room. One morning, she opens her docket to a name she doesn't recognize. Small charge: loitering, obstruction, resisting. A teenager, barely 17, thin, slouched, hoodie drawn up over his head. He doesn't speak when the bailiff calls his name. Doesn't look up. His public defender, fresh out of law school, offers a plea deal. Naomi scans the file. Arrested near a transit station. Refused to show ID. Said he didn't trust the badge. Her eyes narrow. Not because he resisted, but because she's seen this exact script before. She looks at the boy. "Mr. Carter," she says softly. He doesn't lift his head. She tries again. "Can you tell me what happened that night?" Still nothing. The silence stretches. Long. Uncomfortable. But Naomi lets it breathe. Because she knows what silence is. She was silenced once. Finally, the boy looks up. His voice is barely a whisper. "They cut my shoelaces off in the holding room." The courtroom shifts. No one speaks. Naomi leans forward. "What did they say when they did that?" He swallows. "They said it was protocol. Said I looked like I might run." She nods slowly, then glances at the officers in the room. "I'm requesting body cam footage from the moment of detainment through processing," she says. Her tone doesn't rise. It doesn't need to. A murmur runs through the gallery. And for the first time, the boy sits up straighter. She turns to the defender. "We'll reconvene once we have a full accounting. In the meantime, Mr. Carter is released on his own recognizance." The gavel taps once. No drama. Just correction. Outside, the boy's mother waits. She sees her son walk out without charges and without fear. And when she sees Naomi, she doesn't cry. She bows her head. Not in submission. In gratitude. Because in a world that shaved her down once, Naomi now guards the dignity of those still learning how to wear it. The apology never comes. Not really. Not the kind that matters. Wexler doesn't write one. Doesn't ask to meet. Doesn't look Naomi in the eye again. Not at the grocery store. Not in traffic. Not even the day she walked past him at the DMV while he stood in line like everyone else. She doesn't need it. But that doesn't mean it isn't owed. What does arrive, months later, is a plain envelope. No return address. Inside, a single folded page. Typed. Simple. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I wasn't trained to see you as anything but noise. I laughed because I thought that would drown you out. But you didn't go silent. You sat. And now I see you everywhere. in the way other officers flinch before they speak, in the way policy is being rewritten, in the way people look at judges and don't assume. You redefine the room. I just hope the silence left behind me is louder than the damage I made. No name. Just initials, TW. She reads it once. Then again. Then folds it carefully and tucks it into the back of her robe closet, not because it absolves anything, but because even shame written down is better than denial printed loud. That same day, the city clerk drops off an envelope at her office. Inside, the official paperwork. No longer interim. Now permanent. Judge Naomi Clark. Sworn in. Recognized. Seated. She stares at the letter, then sets it down beside her mother's photo, the one that's been riding shotgun since day one. Naomi whispers to the frame. Still got a lot of cases to hear. That afternoon, she walks into court and finds a girl, barely 13, sitting in the front row. Alone. Big eyes. Twisting her hoodie string between her fingers. Naomi pauses before taking the bench. You here with someone? She asks. The girl shakes her head. My sister's case. I wanted to watch. Naomi studies her for a moment, then smiles gently. You picked a good day. She doesn't mean because the docket's short. She means because this bench, this room, is no longer a place of removal. It's a place of return. A place where those who were silenced now speak with structure. And the man who shaved her? He'll be remembered, not for the power he held, but for how fast it melted. When she stood taller without hair than he ever did with a badge. There's a mirror in Naomi's chambers. Not for vanity. For proof. It hangs across from her desk, simple and square. No gold trim or engraving, just a frame and the truth. Every morning, before putting on her robe, she stands in front of it, runs her hand through her curls, lets her fingers pause at her scalp, feels the roots, the softness, the strength that grew back in silence and sunlight and study. She tells herself, they shaved the surface. They didn't touch the foundation. One day, while gathering paperwork, she finds a photo tucked between court files. A printout of that day. The day of the haircut. Low resolution. Her back is to the camera. Wexler stands behind her, clippers raised, mouth twisted into something like satisfaction. She studies it. The body language. The smirks in the background. The way no one's looking at her like a person. She almost throws it away. Almost. But instead, she writes on the back. This was the last day I stood alone in this room. Then files it under a folder marked memory. Because even pain has a place, when you're the one deciding where to put it. The next week, she's invited to speak at a judicial ethics panel. She accepts. Not because she wants to lecture. Because presence is a message. The room is stiff, polished, wood-paneled. Men in dark suits. Women with steel in their posture. But Naomi walks in, robe on, hair full, voice calm. When she's introduced, someone in the crowd shifts. It's the bailiff from that day. Older now. Thinner. Eyes flickering between recognition and shame. She sees him. Doesn't flinch. Instead, she opens her notes and says, sometimes, the most dangerous power in a courtroom isn't the gavel. It's the laugh. The smirk. The unchecked comfort in someone else's humiliation. And it's our job to ensure that what happens in silence doesn't stay in silence. No one claps. Not yet. They're too busy absorbing it. She steps off the stage. Passes the bailiff. He starts to open his mouth. She gently lifts a hand. Not to silence him. To release him. Then walks on. Because forgiveness isn't always about words. Sometimes, it's about leaving people where you found them. While you rise. The story reaches the papers again, but this time, it's not buried on page 6. Front page. Judge Naomi Clark, from courtroom shame to judicial power. A side-by-side photo. Left, the grainy image from her arrest, head bowed, scalp raw. Right, her official robe photo, curls framing her face, chin lifted, stare calm and unshakable. The headline ripples through the city. Churches reference it in sermons. Schools mention her name during civics class. One after-school program pins her photo to the wall with a new label beneath. This is what justice looks like when it heals. But Naomi doesn't read the article right away. She's too busy reviewing a motion, one filed by a young public defender, a woman fresh from law school, the same woman who once sat in Naomi's courtroom gallery with braids and questions in her eyes. The motion is solid, strategic, compassionate. Naomi signs it without edits. When the young attorney comes in later, nervous and grateful, Naomi just says, "You made my job easy." Then adds, Keep making it harder for the right people. That evening, Naomi walks to her car later than usual. A group of law students stands outside the courthouse, waiting, unsure if they should speak. She notices. Approaches. One of them stammers. Judge Clark, we're studying judicial integrity, and we were just wondering, how do you stay so composed? She pauses, then smiles. I remember what it felt like to lose everything. And I remember who I was before they tried to take it. She nods to one of the students, a young woman wearing a sweatshirt that reads Reclaim Justice. You'll be tested. Not once. Not loud. Quietly. Repeatedly. And every time you are, remember this. The bench is only powerful because people believe in the one who sits on it. They scribble notes. She doesn't tell them the full story. Not today. Because sometimes, the most powerful legacy you leave is the unfinished sentence someone else will pick up. As Naomi drives home, the streetlights flicker across her windshield like camera flashes. But she isn't performing. She's practicing. Every day. Not for applause. For correction. Because her justice doesn't wear vengeance. It wears memory. And curls. They invite her to speak at the law school she couldn't afford 10 years ago. Not as a case study. As the keynote. Naomi stands at the podium, looking out at the lecture hall she once stared at from outside the glass, wondering what it would be like to belong. No? She commands it. No slides. No pomp. Just her voice, low and unwavering. She opens. I was once made an example of. But the thing about examples is that they can become standards. She talks about the night after the courtroom humiliation. How she washed clumps of her own hair down a sink that didn't drain properly. How she promised herself that no one would ever use a uniform or a title to shrink her again. She doesn't cry. Neither do they. But some clutch their pins tighter. One student, in the second row, leans forward with his chin in his hand like he's hearing his future read out loud. When she finishes, the applause doesn't burst. It builds. From a hum to a wave to a standing ovation that shakes the bones of the old academic building. Later, in the lobby, a professor corners her. He's older. Pale. Glasses low on the bridge of his nose. He says, I was on the committee the year you applied. I voted no. I didn't think you were ready. Naomi smiles. Turns out, I wasn't. Pause. But I was necessary. He nods, embarrassed. She offers her hand. Shakes his. Because truth doesn't always need a gavel. Sometimes it just needs a mirror. Back in her car, Naomi opens her phone. A message waits from an unfamiliar number. You spoke in a courtroom where I was once silenced. I heard you through the walls. Thank you for staying in the room. No signature. She saves it. No reply needed. Because she knows. People are watching. Listening. Learning. Not from her wounds. But from her rebuilding. And every time she steps behind the bench, she isn't just rendering verdicts. She's reteaching what power looks like. When it remembers where it came from, the robe doesn't feel heavy anymore. At first, it was armor. Now, it's second skin. Naomi walks into the courtroom like a woman who never left. The marble doesn't echo as sharply. The fluorescent lights seem softer, somehow. Or maybe it's just her presence reshaping the room. Today's docket is full. Noise ordinance. Tenant dispute. Probation violation. And one case that makes the air shift. A woman. Black. Late 20s. Hands cuffed. Hair in locks, pulled back tight. Naomi watches the bailiff escort her to the stand. The woman doesn't look up. Her posture is carved from defense and years of being told to keep your tone down. The charge? Contempt of court. Naomi looks at the complaint. Filed by a different judge. Reason given? Argumentative during sentencing. Naomi breathes through her nose. Slow. Steady. She gestures for the cuffs to be removed. The bailiff hesitates. She doesn't raise her voice. Just says, this courtroom doesn't bind for behavior. It listens for context. The bailiff unlocks them. The woman rubs her wrists. Still doesn't look up. Naomi leans forward just slightly. Ma'am, I'm not here to relive your last courtroom. I'm here to hear you. The woman blinks. Then her lips tremble, not from fear, but from the shock of not being instantly disbelieved. She finally speaks. They told me I was out of line for saying I needed time to find childcare. Naomi nods. That's it. That's the whole reason she's in shackles. Not for a crime. For being a mother with too much reality and too few options. Naomi dismisses the charge. No theatrics. Just correction, quietly delivered with the weight of experience. After the woman leaves, Naomi steps into her chambers. She stands in front of her mirror. Again, she looks at herself, at her curls, at her robe, at the steady eyes looking back. Then she pins something new to the corkboard on the wall. A small note, scrawled in pen. There's no such thing as courtroom neutrality in a system built on imbalance. It's not a slogan. It's a reminder that every time she sits at that bench, she is not just undoing harm. She is redefining justice. The city hosts its annual Unity Forum at the Civic Center. It's an event filled with suits and smiles, speeches about togetherness, panels about policy, and cupcakes too sweet for anyone's good. Naomi usually skips it, but this year, she gets the invitation directly from the mayor's office with a note handwritten on the back. We know who shaped the shift. We'd like you to speak. She doesn't prepare a speech. She walks in, robe over her dress, curls framing her face, heels soft against the polished floor. The moderator introduces her. Judge Naomi Clark, community advocate, judicial reformer, and, as many of you know, a symbol of what rebuilding dignity can look like. The room quiets. She steps up. No mic feedback. No clearing of the throat. Just this. Justice isn't a room. It's not marble. Not a gavel. Not a title. It's what happens when people who were once silenced are handed the pen and allowed to write the record themselves. Pause. I was once that silence. I stood in chains. My head was shaved. Not by law. By permission disguised as procedure. Heads lower. Some in guilt. Some in awe. But I'm not here to retell that pain. I'm here to remind you what it birthed. Every time I take the bench, I bring the people who never got to. Every time I sign a dismissal, I erase echoes. And every time I look in the mirror before zipping up this robe, I remind myself, you were not made for punishment. You were made for * presence. Applause doesn't come instantly. It builds, like rain on a rooftop that finally starts to pour. Later, a woman approaches Naomi in the hallway. Older, grayer, eyes tired. She speaks softly. You don't remember me, but I was the clerk. The day they shaved you. Naomi stiffens. But the woman continues. I didn't stop it. I laughed. Tears gather at the edges of her words. Naomi doesn't interrupt. I left that job the next month. I couldn't keep pretending marble made me clean. Silence. Then Naomi places a hand gently on the woman's arm. Says nothing. Because not all forgiveness needs words. Sometimes, acknowledgement is the justice. As Naomi walks out into the dusk, the city lights blink on one by one. And with each step she takes, the courthouse behind her doesn't shrink. It stays tall. But now, it feels like hers. Naomi's story begins appearing in textbooks. Not in sidebars or footnotes, but in chapters. Civics classes across the state dedicate an entire unit, Restorative Justice and the Rise of Judge Naomi Clark. Students read about her courtroom, the haircut, the silence, the return. They debated. One essay reads, they tried to reduce her to a lesson in obedience. Instead, she became a syllabus on power. A group of high school seniors writes to her, asking for a tour of her courtroom. She says yes. The day they arrive, they're fidgety. Phones half drawn, unsure if they should snap photos or just watch. Naomi steps in, robe trailing just slightly behind her. Set your phones down, she says, smiling. Today, you don't record history. You walk in it. She leads them through the court, shows them where she sat that day in chains, where Wexler stood, where the clerk once laughed. Then she walks them to the bench. One girl, a quiet one, asks if she can sit. Naomi nods. The girl climbs up. The others gasp, then hush. She looks so small in the chair. But Naomi only says, hold your spine straight. That's how the room listens. The girl does. And for a moment, no one breathes. They see it. They feel it. What it means to reclaim space that once tried to erase you. Afterward, the class gathers outside. The wind stirs a little. The teacher pulls Naomi aside. She wrote her college essay on you, he whispers, nodding toward the quiet girl. She called you her mirror. Said you gave her the right to exist, loudly. Naomi turns to look at the girl. Their eyes meet. They both smile. Because this is what legacy looks like when it isn't about statues or street names. It's about reflection. That night, Naomi pins a new note to her board. Simple. Typed. Let them sit. Let them speak. Let them know this seat was carved by someone who bled first. And when she turns off the light, the silence that follows, it feels like applause. Held in reverence. The bench starts to wear her shape. Not physically, but spiritually. There's something different about the courtroom now, even on the days Naomi isn't there. Like her presence stain the space with expectation, with justice that has a pulse. Other judges visit to observe. They sit quietly in the back. They don't admit it openly, but they're studying her rhythm, how she listens with her whole face, how she speaks like memory is her co-counsel, how the gavel never lands unless it has to. The city awards her a Medal Civil Service distinction. The mayor reads a citation, mentions her unshakable commitment to justice and dignity. She thanks them politely, but she doesn't wear the medal. Instead, she returns to the place where it began, the old booking room, the one where the guards laughed, where her reflection first met her bare scalp. The walls are still gray, still tight. She walks in with permission from the new commissioner. She stands in the center, alone, and she speaks, not loudly, not to anyone in particular, just to the air that remembers. You almost got me, but you didn't. Then she pulls something from her coat pocket, a single braid, one they missed on the floor that day, saved in a drawer for years. She walks to the corner, tapes it to the wall, leaves it there. No plaque, no photo op, just evidence of survival. Back in her chambers, she begins writing again. A letter this time, addressed not to Wexler, not to the city, to herself. 10 years ago. You will not forget what they did, but you will also not carry it as a weight. You'll wear it like armor, speak it like scripture. And one day, a little girl will sit in your chair and not flinch, and you'll realize that was always the mission. She seals the letter, files it under grace, and prepares for court, because the docket may shift. But her mission? It never did. Glorious. They bounce slightly as Naomi walks, not just into court, but into history. Because today marks 10 years since the Clippers. 10 years since silence. 10 years since she was made a symbol before she even had a title. But now, she's more than a symbol. She's standard. A crowd gathers in the courtyard outside the courthouse. Not for a protest. For a dedication. A bronze sculpture is unveiled. It's not of Naomi. It's of a courtroom chair. Empty, but engraved on the back. Some benches are earned. Not by favor, but by fire. On the base, 5 words. This seat reclaimed by presence. As the wind picks up, Naomi steps forward. She doesn't stand behind the podium. She stands beside the sculpture, one hand resting on its armrest, and she speaks softly, barely above the breeze. They called it discipline. It was humiliation. They called it procedure. It was performance. But today, this is what we call it now, proof. The crowd doesn't erupt. They settle. Because some stories don't need loud endings. They need quiet landings. Later that evening, Naomi returns to her courtroom. She turns off the lights, leaves a small lamp on, walks to the bench, sits. She doesn't open her docket. She opens her notebook, writes the final line. I am no longer what they tried to make me. I am what I chose to become. Then she closes it and breathes. Because power, when reclaimed properly, doesn't scream. It just remains. Like her curls, like the bench, like the echo of clippers that no longer own the air, but serve as the prelude to something much stronger. Her voice, and the silence that now respects it.